Welcome to the Pivot PRN Podcast. I'm your host, Cecilia Motto.
And I'm your co-host, Connie Betz. We are both nurses who dare to dream beyond the bedside, and we're ready to share our experiences and those of others who have found themselves at a crossroads in their careers.
Every month, we'll bring you authentic conversations filled with practical tips and wisdom to help you better navigate the twists and turns of a scary career transition.
So, if you're ready to make a change, you're in the right place. It's time to take control of your life, PRN style.
Ready for your pivot? Let's do this.
Hello, Pivoters. Welcome to the Pivot PRN Podcast. This is Connie Betz, and I wanted to get on here and record our first solo episode. I felt called to record this episode because I kind of wanted to give you an update as to what was going on with my life. I wanted to open up about why I stepped away from nursing. As everyone knows from one of our first episodes, I am a nurse. I still would call myself a nurse, even if I never went back to nursing. I feel like once you're a nurse, you're kind of always a nurse. You just, you're trained in it and you give so much of your heart and soul into it that it's hard to really detach from it. In a sense, you are a nurse forever, but you can choose to not work as a nurse. I felt called to share this story because, I started this Pivot PRN podcast. I started the Pivot PRN podcast with Cecilia because I had pivoted into my freelance virtual assistant business, and I thought to myself at the time that I was leaving nursing. I thought I was pivoting, changing paths completely, but now that I'm in the middle of it, or once I was in the middle of it, I realized, there's something missing here. First of all, financially, I don't want to say it like that, but I couldn't go cold turkey from nursing. And there are aspects of nursing that I found myself missing when I was working freelance, when I was just, I was doing virtual assisting and being a travel advisor. There were things that I was missing from nursing. It was what kind of changed my mind was I went to Mexico with my husband for our 1-year anniversary, and I found myself not being able to fully enjoy it. I think I felt guilty because I wasn't financially stable. I wasn't in a financial place where I felt like I deserved this vacation. I felt like financially I was lacking. I was also feeling like the work that I did was a little bit superficial, if that makes sense. Not that, I love being a virtual assistant. I love everything we do, but it's just such a drastic shift to go from nursing where you're helping people every day. And yes, that comes with all of its stresses. But it was so hard to shift from that to sitting at home behind a desk, helping business owners with their social media or email marketing or whatever. Like it made me, I felt like there was something missing. I felt like, going back to what I said, once a nurse, always a nurse. And there was some part of me that was like, I want to be able to help people more directly, help them heal, help them improve their health. Like for me, I felt like I needed to do something a little bit more substantial or something a little more rewarding, I guess. I think the work I do, as much as I love the creativity that goes into virtual assistants, social media management, and travel advising. Like, I love all the creativity of, creating the marketing materials, designing websites, working in Canva for all these things. Like, I loved that. But at the same time, I felt like something was missing. I felt like I needed to do something a bit more, at least for myself. I know there are so many people out there who, that's their bread and butter. They love it. But for me, I think it was just such a hard transition to go out of nursing, where you're helping people all the time heal, to something where I'm behind a desk and not even really directly working with my clients. Like, I'm messaging them or whatever. But at the same time, I had this realization that there can be both. And, that was kind of a beautiful realization, and something that I think all of you listening can relate to. I think there is room for both. There's room for all kinds of interests. Like, you can be an engineer, but also create art. You can be a podcaster, but you can also be a lawyer. You can do so much. And I think that was something that I learned during this process of starting a business, is that you are so complex. We are complex beings who have several interests, and there is room for it all. But yeah, so that's kind of what I felt called to share. Just a little bit of backstory for myself, what kind of nurse I was. I worked in the hospital. I worked in a hospital downtown LA. I was a telemetry nurse, which means that I worked with patients who were hooked up to heart monitors. They had a lot of comorbidities that were heart related, so they needed to be monitored at all times, even if they came in for some other reason, like maybe they needed a surgery, but they needed to be on a monitor because they had history of like heart failure or something like that. So I was a nurse in this hospital in downtown LA. I have mixed feelings about my time there. It was soul crushing, I will say that, especially once the pandemic started. I think that was kind of the impetus for me to leave the bedside. I felt so burned out, and, they work you so hard. They barely give you any thanks. They have all those signs that say like, heroes work here. Thank you for all you do. But, it falls on deaf ears when we're severely understaffed and patients are dying. Patients are, treating us like crap, and we don't even have the supplies that we need to do our job. It was just a combination of different things. I remember for Nurses Week, which is supposed to be this very celebratory week, showing gratitude for nurses. I remember at the time all they gave me was dollar store shampoo. Nope.
The Pivot PRN podcast is proudly sponsored by Nova Nails, your premier destination for high-quality, semi-cured gel nail stickers and essential nail tools. Founded by the inspiring Priscilla, with whom I had the pleasure of meeting at a like-minded collective event, Nova Nails is an empowering brand led by an Asian American female entrepreneur. As a busy mom, I understand the challenges of finding time for self-care. Visiting a nail salon can be difficult, especially when arranging childcare. That's why I love Nova Nails at-home do-it-yourself gel manicure kits. With these products, I can achieve salon-quality nails at a fraction of the cost, allowing me to look and feel professional at networking events. The durability of their products is remarkable. They last up to 3 weeks, empowering me to be my own nail tech. Take advantage of our exclusive discount code PIVOT10 and receive 10% off your first order at nova-nails.co. Elevate your style today and make sure to use this code before it expires.
Conditioner, just dollar store shampoo. That's it. I would have loved to just not get anything. Like, why even bother? But I don't know. I digress. But essentially, What I'm trying to say is I was burned out. What I loved about nursing and why I eventually went back to it was the feeling at the end of the day. And something I didn't realize until I was working in my business was, I miss that feeling like at the end of the day when you're leaving, like you've given report to the next nurse, you're signed out or you're clocked out, you're going to your car. Like, I don't know. It's a very rewarding feeling of like I made a difference in someone's life, even though this was a shitty day. Often it was a very shitty day, but at the end of it, there was always this feeling of I did something helpful today. I did something that was contributing to society today. I felt like I contributed in a positive way today. And that's something that I was honestly missing from my business, which, it's fun. I feel like the business is fun and I love it. It's my baby. Quite literally, it's my baby. But at the same time, there's just something that was missing that I just couldn't quite place. And then that trip to Mexico kind of made me realize, if I was working in the hospital, if I was working as a nurse right now and I had this vacation, I think I would feel great. Like I would have felt like I deserved this vacation. And, that's not to say that people in business have like a superficial, no, it's not a superficial thing. But I think for me, I need something where I'm directly helping my community and I can see it. It's like I need a visual confirmation that I'm directly helping someone, if that makes sense. Whereas my business, it's like, okay, I'm creating these assets, I'm creating these marketing materials, and maybe they're helpful, maybe they're not. I mean, there's analytics and all that where you can see, but I think for me, it's like I need that assurance or I need that validation. Where I can see like, oh, this patient looks better today, or I helped this, or I gave this patient his pain meds and now he feels better, or what have you. But maybe I'm just like a visual person. But then at the same time with nursing, you don't get that creativity either. There's no room. And partly why I got so burned out and why I really just wanted a change from healthcare was I felt like I had to be correct 100% of the time. There's so much pressure to be right. There's so much pressure to have all the answers. And frankly, I didn't, but I had to act like I did. And I got tired of that. And that's what I love about my business. That's what I love about creativity. That's what I love about marketing and just being a virtual assistant. It's like, it's lower stakes. So you can be iterative. You test out what works. If you don't quite hit the mark, you can just pivot, or you can just pivot PRN. You can just change it up. It's so simple. It's like, oh, okay, this strategy didn't work. Boo-hoo, let's make a change, But in the healthcare setting, if something like that happens, you can harm the patient. You can have a lawsuit on your hands. So, there's a lot. It's very complicated, So yeah, definitely there were parts of nursing that are draining, and those signs that something needed to shift were that, I just didn't feel supported. I didn't feel supported by my leadership. They were ready to just throw us to the wolves during the pandemic. And I don't know, I had this dreadful feeling when I would go into work, which honestly was more a reflection of the workplace versus nursing as a whole. And that's something that I've learned that I need to differentiate, is that, even if one job is horrible, that doesn't mean the whole industry is horrible. And I think that's where a lot of people can be mistaken. If one job sucks, just try a different job in the same industry. And you might be surprised with how much you love that job more than you did the previous job. And I'm finding that with this new job as well. But yeah, anyway, I digress again. So the pivot began when I was a nurse working bedside a few years ago. How did that pivot begin? So the moment I knew I needed a change, honestly, in that last year or so, I was working night shift during my school because I was in NP school, which honestly, I don't know why I went to NP school, but that's another story. No, well, that's a pretty simple answer, actually. I felt like I needed to do the most logical next step, which is to become a nurse practitioner. Because I had been a registered nurse for several years. I was like, what can I do? I am unhappy at this job. What can I do now? Which I could have just gone to a different job, but I thought to myself, hey, let's become a nurse practitioner. Let's go back to school, become a nurse practitioner. And I wouldn't say I regret becoming a nurse practitioner because my current job is as a nurse practitioner in wound care, and it's a pretty steady job. Like, I've got it good, honestly. I think I started NP school for the wrong reasons. I really just wanted to get away from that job. I was working again downtown LA, full-time, day shift, very busy community hospital. I just wanted to take a step back. Really, I just needed a break from bedside. I could have gone to a different nursing job that wasn't in the hospital, but instead I was like, hey, let's go back to school. Logical next step, right? But anyway, the moment I knew I needed a change, I would say was just during the pandemic. I just seeing how our management just kind of abandoned us. And I realized, they don't care about us. Why should I care about this job? I mean, okay, I'm helping these COVID patients, but at the risk of my own health, and we're not even getting the proper protective equipment for ourselves. So I'm literally going in there risking my life every day. And I think that was sort of the last straw for me. Of course, I stayed on until I could get a remote job. And yeah, I quit. I did this remote job as a nurse practitioner for like a year. It was pretty much just like, it was COVID screenings, and then COVID didn't die out, but the whole frenzy around COVID kind of died, and then I got laid off. And then I just never got another job after that. And I had a wedding to plan for. So I just kind of like took a year. Really, yeah, I took a couple years, honestly, to, just step back, focus on the wedding, and just kind of reconnect with myself. And then that's when I started my freelance VA business and became a travel advisor and, did all these things that were outside of healthcare. But in that transition, I had a lot of fears. I had a lot of insecurities about leaving healthcare because for so long, I've been known as a nurse. It really had me question my identity. It's like, who am I if I'm not a nurse, if I'm not working in healthcare? Like, who am I? And it was bad. I mean, it's still there. Even though I'm back in healthcare, I still feel this identity crisis, this like guilt. Yeah, this guilt or this discomfort being around loved ones, being around my mom, being around my family, because that's what they talk to me about. They're like, what are you doing now? Like, what is your job? You should do this. You should do that. The conversations we have are very much career focused. And I don't know if any of you can relate, but a lot of my family took pride that I was in healthcare. And they would ask me all the time at these family gatherings, like, oh, where are you working now? And, I just had to avoid those questions or just kind of tell them, I'm not working in healthcare right now. And of course, they'll be whispering behind my back once I leave. It's like, but at the same time, you can't live your life according to others' expectations. And that's something that I really had to learn. They probably felt worried about me. Like, she's going through this crisis of, she thinks she doesn't want to be a nurse. And like, if she's not a nurse, then who is she? Blah, blah, blah. It's like it's almost like I didn't want them to feel that confusion. I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm very much a people pleaser. I think I felt responsible for their feelings. I felt like if I told them that I'm no longer working in healthcare, that if they felt confused or if they felt any sort of discomfort, that I was letting them down or I was causing that in some way. And I was frankly disappointing my family. I was a failure, wasting my parents' money. There's just all of these things that are floating in my mind as I'm going to these functions, and I can't be present. And I still feel that way. I feel like whenever I go to a friend gathering or a family gathering, I'm just so anxious for what they're going to talk to me about or ask me. I'm so anxious that they're going to ask me about my job, or they're going to ask about my business. They're going to ask me, like, why did you leave nursing? And, there was so much of that over the past year, 2 years.
The Pivot PRN Podcast is proudly sponsored by Nova Nails, your premier destination for high-quality, semi-cured gel nail stickers and essential nail tools. Founded by the inspiring Priscilla, with whom I had the pleasure of meeting at a like-minded collective event, Nova Nails is an empowering brand led by an Asian American female entrepreneur. As a busy mom, I understand the challenges of finding time for self-care. Visiting a nail salon can be difficult, especially when arranging childcare. That's why I love Nova Nails at-home do-it-yourself gel manicure kits. With these products, I can achieve salon-quality nails at a fraction of the cost, allowing me to look and feel professional at networking events. The durability of their products is remarkable. They last up to 3 weeks, empowering me to be my own nail tech. Take advantage of our exclusive discount code PIVOT10 and receive 10% off your first order at nova-nails.co. Elevate your style today and make sure to use this code before it expires.
Since getting laid off from my last job, but yeah, and it's still ongoing. And I know a lot of people are in the same boat. You have made a leap into some other industry. I'm sure you probably have an identity crisis, or you have some guilt around it, or your family members or your friends are very confused with why you would do that. But you got to remember, and this is something that I'm struggling with, you're not doing it for their benefit. You're doing it for yourself. You're doing it because you want a life on your own terms. You're doing it because you want to live the life of your dreams, as cheesy as that sounds, but you only have one life. If you're spending your life doing something you hate, then like, what's the point? I mean, I get the financial stability that, you need to pay the bills. That's why, you don't have to completely quit your job. I mean, that's honestly partly why I went back into nursing, because being a VA wasn't paying the bills. So I took a part-time wound care specialist job, and now I have the money to fund my business. I can, make a website. I can go to all these networking things that cost money. And that's something I wasn't able to do when I was just working on my business without any nursing job. So, I think if you do go back into your 9 to 5, if you feel like you have to, I think there's a lot of guilt that comes with that. And I certainly felt that way at first. But there is this mindset shift that really helped me where, I went to this networking event where it was like a journaling networking event with like-minded OC. I think we went to Newport Beach. We were all sitting in a kumbaya circle, and I remember writing writing what was on my heart, how I felt so guilty that I went back into nursing after all of this hoopla of like, oh, I left healthcare to start my own business and blah, blah, blah. I had that story in my head. I had that narrative, and it felt like defeat when I had to go back into nursing. But yeah, and I shared that with the group, and these women were just so amazing. They truly understood where I was coming from, and they really helped me change my mindset and they told me that it's not defeat. It's helping you invest in your business. Let me say that again. Going back to your 9 to 5 because because you're not financially stable with just your business, it's not defeat. It's helping you invest in your business. And that was something that really shifted my mindset. And after that, I felt like, okay, this wasn't a defeat. I'm doing this for my business. And that was just like so important for me to hear from these women. Like, I can see how a lot of people would see that as like, they lost the battle. They're failing. Their business is failing because they had to go back to their 9 to 5. No, there's ebbs and flows in business. And if you have something to fall back on, honestly, and like I said, there's room for both. So you can go back to your 9 to 5, and on your days off, which I'm only working part-time at my nursing job, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So on my days off, Thursday through Sunday, I can work on my business and in my business. So honestly, I'm getting the best of both worlds. And I'm actually really happy with where I am. And in fact, I could even take on more clients in my business. Like, I feel like I'm in a really good place career-wise. So anyway, but yeah, I guess the point of everything I'm saying right now is that yes, I left nursing, but I also returned to it on my own terms. Yes, maybe it was partially for financial reasons, but at the same time, I didn't go back to working in the hospital. I was intentional with choosing a job where I had a good work-life balance, part-time, only Monday through Wednesday. I don't work 12-hour shifts anymore. I pretty much go to different nursing homes and I round on patients at these nursing homes, and I'm done seeing patients before noon, and I just chart. I go home and chart. And that's like the whole work day. And then some days are lighter than others, but I'm typically done by dinner time, and I can just be in my sweats at home and do my documentation at home. So honestly, I feel like I returned to healthcare on my own terms. So, and I really wish that for you as well. And I want you to realize that there's no shame in going back to your 9 to 5. There's the reality of finances. There's the reality of, you might need benefits. Maybe you're pregnant and you need insurance. There's nothing wrong about that. There's nothing weak with going back to your 9 to 5. It doesn't mean that you failed at pivoting. And I think also an important mindset shift is I'm not going backward. I'm just choosing both. So I'm wishing you all so much love. Please like and subscribe to our podcast. Please like and subscribe. And remember, you can pivot, pause, return, reinvent, and still be aligned. Talk to you soon. Peace.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Pivot PRN Podcast. We hope today's conversation inspired you to take the next step in your own pivot journey.
Remember, every big change starts with a single step, and we're here to support you the whole way. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who's ready for a change.
And if you're looking for more insights, tips, or community, follow us on Instagram at Pivot PRN Podcast.
Until next time, keep pushing boundaries, and remember, it's never too late to pivot.